Hello everyone and welcome back to Silicon Sounds, audio for the rest of us. Today it's my pleasure to once again another review, another Kiwi Ears product. This one is the Kiwi Ears Etude, or Etude if you are speaking in French, and I would label this or call this review Rumble in the Jungle. So a little preamble here. Readers or people who watch my YouTube channel will instantly recognize the Kiwi Ears company name, the brand. I've had a number of their products grace my ears over a short period of time, and for the most part, I've been very impressed. This one, though, is different. The Etude, while sporting a more traditional driver complement that does include a 10mm Beryllium dynamic driver, 3 balanced armatures, one of which for the mids, and a dual unit for the treble. There is an ace of it up its sleeve, and it incorporates a different kind of driver that Kiwi Ears calls the KVT. It's an acronym for Kiwi Vibration Transducer. In fact, they go out of their way to state that the KVT is not like the typical bone conduction driver currently in use by earphones. Rather, it's more akin to a scaled-down miniature vibration driver that are used in Bluetooth vibration speakers. Let me break it down even more. This transducer is basically a vibrating conduction plate operating in its own vibration chamber. It does affect the sound. Interestingly, tapping the shell does return some interesting reverberant sound. And it vibrates, actually. Interesting. The Etude does better with ample power driving it. That's one of the, I wouldn't say downsides, but something to note. In particular with respect to the bass, underpowered bass quality takes a definite tumble, takes an audible hit, and that also extends up into the clarity and tightness of the mid-range, especially the lower mids, and the presence and overall clarity. For best sonics, power the Etude well. So let's take a nice look at it. Interesting. Very nice. Understated Kiwi Ears design as per usual, yet elegant. We'll continue. Tuning is relatively balanced, but the bass does stand out to a great extent, but more so on how different it sounds, as opposed to it overpowering the rest of the frequency range, which it does not, by the way. Bass here, when I first started listening to the Etude, reminded me more of a home speaker as opposed to listening to an IEM. It took me back to the days of my father with his Philips speakers with their 15-inch woofers and 3.5-inch, 4-inch dome tweeters, a dome mid-range, sorry, and a 1-inch dome tweeter, which actually sounded quite clean, but the Etude just reminded me of that kind of presentation, more a home speaker than an in-ear monitor. It is not overbearing. It has great punchiness in the mid-bass, but let's get into that a little later. Specs: 3 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver, and 1 BN driver. Kiwi Ears Vibration Transducer. The sensitivity is 104 decibels SPL per milliwatt. Frequency response 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Impedance is low at 5 ohms. And it uses a 2-pin. See that here? Hopefully you see it clearly. It uses a 2-pin connector, typical 0.78 millimeter. And it comes with a 1.2 millimeter basic cable. We'll talk about that later. Build and fit. The Etude is a larger, chunky sized IEM. It is attractive. I love the faceplate. Beautiful. But it's larger than average size. It's quite bulky. I guess that is due to the chamber dimensions necessary for the vibration transducer to work correctly or be tuned correctly to work. During listening, I did not have any issues with respect to fitment, but I can see those with smaller ears may not fare as well. Build quality overall, though, was typical Kiwi Ears, and that is very good. Very good. The packaging is also typical Kiwi Ears. So hopefully you see this. You get the Kiwi Ears box, which is the same for pretty much all their IEMs except for the color scheme, the picture, and of course the name of the IEM. With respect to the included accessories, and I'll bring them out right now. We have the typical Kiwi Ears box, which is good. No problems there. Also includes tips, cables, and accessory. There's 3 sets of tips here. 3 sets of tips for your pleasure, and the included cable. Now, if you've watched a few of my Kiwi Ears reviews for the Septet and the Astral, which I love very much, this is the cable that comes with the Astral. Definitely, it's modular. Definitely a step above. This cable here actually is somewhat better than some of the past year's Kiwi Ears offerings. Although it is somewhat basic, still a nice cable. Nothing to write home about, but it'll do the trick. And I love the fact that they included 3 sets of tips instead of 1 to choose from. The case is typical Kiwi Ears. That's what you get. Good size, fairly decent protection. Nothing to talk about too much here. Let's get back to this. So overall, the retail presentation is very consistent among the Kiwi Ears line. I believe the Etude goes for somewhere between $160 and $170. The Astral, which we'll be comparing it later, goes for about double the price. So we're going to talk about that. So here we go as we continue. Sorry if you hear the background noise here. Let's talk about the bass. Right away, it becomes apparent that the tuners of the Etude did spend some time with this particular bass implementation. Kiwi Ears, along with companies like BGVP, have garnered much of my praise with respect to their ability to combine different driver types and technologies and still produce a very cohesive, great sounding IEM, getting the best out of whatever driver type they use. The low end has a density to it. There's a density, not even a thickness, just a density. Thickness as well, but thickness, when you mention thickness, some people might think it's thick, it's kludgy, it's like thick syrup. No, this is density to it that at times reminded me again of my dad's old speakers with their 15-inch woofers. But this is not to take away from the quality heard though, because the quality is quite good. Bass here takes on a more tactile quality with ample power and slam and thickness to it that did make me sit up and take notice more than once. Even with such a bold presentation, the quality of the low end is surprisingly good. When adequately powered, the Etude is capable of relaying detail and texture in a pleasing way. Not the most textured or detailed of bass, but with respect to the price range, pretty good. And it also it's taut with good thickness. Now, bass, let me get into it a little bit more. Bass does sound larger than many other IEMs, and I'm not talking about the force, the power, the presence. It just sounds larger. Again, that tactile presentation to it, the dense tactile presentation. But I need to make something perfectly clear. Calling the Etude a basshead IEM is flat out incorrect. Is the Etude capable of really heavy-duty bass when called for in a track? Absolutely. Most definitely. Bass can be powerful, almost felt if it were, but it is fairly unique in its presentation and it can become addictive even. Bass here is more than just an audible sensation. No, my ears did not vibrate, but I felt that the low end extended beyond the confines of just regular sonics. It really has, again, I use this word again and again, this tactile nature about it that's really good. Doesn't seem, the KVT definitely does not sound like your typical bone conductor implementation. It is, in my experience, different, and I, for one, did appreciate what it did and added to the sound. If I can nitpick with a negative, I would say that on some tracks that were void of much deep bass, but had a lot of mid bass, or even I have this track called Bitter Fruit, and on that sometimes the bass had a tinge of hollowness to it, but it for the most part, that didn't really become apparent. Most of the time, the bass that was heard was quite good. Is it the best, most incredible bass I've heard? No, but it's different enough, yet musical enough to capture my attention every time I listen to the Etude. The mid-range. Mid-range is resolving, with a good mix of macro and micro details heard, and while there's a warmth to the mids, they remain neutral overall. That being said, one thing that really stands out with the Etude is its vocal presentation, which was interesting. Vocals can sound a little recessed, yet at times they can stand out. Interestingly, when the track has more information in it, in particular a lot of bass drive, vocals tend to stand out more. If it's a more quiet, quote unquote, quiet track, vocals tend to be pushed a little bit back. I find it really dependent on the track. Again, with busier tracks and more bass presence, pushing the vocals more forward. One thing the Etude I noticed very quickly was how it presented texturing in vocals. It's able to reproduce those nuances very well. The raspiness in someone's voice, the drawing of breath, different things that you would not usually draw your attention will draw your attention when listening to the Etude. Both male and female vocals had a comforting neutral tone to them with good clarity. Instruments as well sounded natural and distinct. Note weight is definitely commendable. There's note weight here, no complaints here. And timbre is actually quite good. Instruments, whether stringed instruments, whether drums, guitars, they all sounded good with pretty good note weight behind them. Transients were reproduced with good attack and natural decay as well. Layering and separation are pretty good. Also notable, but can suffer greatly again if the Etude is not driven by a capable source. This is one IM that really requires or demands, or I should say deserves, a quality source driving it. But what do I mean by a quality source? I mean a source that has good amounts of clean, ample power and is resolving. Pin gain is thankfully kept in check with just a manageable rise there to enhance clarity and keep things interesting. The Etude offers a mid-range that is clean, coherent, and pleasurable to listen to. While not the kind that immediately will drag me as a listener in, it is well suited to long listening sessions and over time does tend to envelop the listener. So it's a good one. Now, treble. Treble here is nicely extended and balanced with adequate qualities of sparkle and air. It is a treble that does not call attention to itself, yet it is not lacking at all. Treble detail retrieval is actually quite good, with no harshness encountered at any time. In fact, I found the treble nicely technical without sounding cold. It is a technical sounding treble with all that detail retrieval. I was listening to Vanston Place 12 a.m. by Ronnie Jordan and was very pleased with how the treble, the strokes of the cymbals, and the different audio effects sounded. Really opened up the track quite a bit, as if the bass didn't do that on its own already. Sounded really good. Cymbal strikes and brushes are reproduced with a nice cleanness and control being natural to my ears, at least. Imaging and soundstage. Soundstage is moderately sized, tuned more for balanced and natural presentation of scale than being overblown in any one direction. More intimate than expansive, the soundstage does not feel cramped or constrained. Imaging within that soundstage is good, if not the most precise I've heard. Although there is a clear separation of instruments and there's space around the instruments. And that could be because of its layering and separation. Let me put that in a different way of saying it, different context. With respect to soundstage, moderately sized, but very sized for neutrality and naturalness as opposed to being overblown. And with respect to the imaging, the placement of instruments, quite good, but not class leading. Still, there was good air and space around each instrument. Let's talk a little verses. Now I'm going to pull in another Kiwi Ears, which I have right away. I believe it's one of the best so far, one of my top IAMs for 2025, the Kiwi Ears Astral. It does use a slightly different hybrid setup and does not have a KVT driver. In essence, the Astral is comparatively a more refined musical tool, quote unquote musical tool, than the Etude. The Astral being overall more precise in its delivery. When I say musical tool, it harkens back to the time I first listened to the 64 Audio U12T. That is a perfect example of a musical tool, something that can be used in the studio, can be used for critical listening, yet sounds fantastic enough that you can just disappear into the music when you finish being critical. That's what the Astral does, at least to me. Bass is interesting as the Astral has great bass, but more of an IEM typical bass than offered by the Etude, whose bass presentation is just different. It is different from pretty much most IEMs I've ever heard. The Etude's bass has greater reverberation in the low end, while the Astral again arguably has better detail retrieval and slightly better control. Mid-range follows the same trend, with the Astral just being that much more precise with better layering and separation, although the Etude is no slouch in that department. It does pretty well. When it comes to vocal textures, the Etude is fantastic. I mean, it's really good. I didn't notice this about the Astral, but when I listened again, I realized it was doing just as good as the Etude. It's just that on the Etude, it just stands out more, those vocal textures. But the Astral is not behind by any way, shape, or form. In the treble, both do very well, with the Astral having more sparkle and air. Each has good detail retrieval and lacks harshness, completely lack of harshness. If I had to choose between the two, please remember that the Astral is double the price of the Etude. Irrespective of that and disregarding price in terms of overall sonics and my preferences, I do prefer the more expensive Astral. It wins here. Having more sparkle and air, just being a more precise sound, yet never sounding clinical, still sounding natural, very pleasing. But the KVT powered bass and balance of the Etude is very well done. And depending on what mood I'm in, I would grab for the Etude as well. But the Astral wins this race. Conclusion. How would I conclude? Well, I believe the Kiwi Ears has another great product here with the Etude. The KVT driver is not a gimmick. It is actually doing something, and something overall, for the most part, very positive. Some would think that the Etude would be a niche product given this type of driver, but Kiwi Ears has proved once again that they're not just about marketing and putting new and untested driver technologies in there. They're about utilizing the new driver technologies or different driver technologies to the best of their ability to achieve a cohesive tuning. And with the Etude, they have done just that. It's a very good sounding IM that just happens to have a bass presentation that I'm sure will garner many fans. The bass in the Etude, the presentation is very unlike the majority of IMs, the vast majority of IMs I've had the pleasure of listening to. It's an IM that offers a clean and interesting sound from a manufacturer that knows how to leverage different driver technologies to create a compelling listening experience. The Kiwi Ears Etude does get a recommendation. Even in the crowded $150 to $200 range, it has a trick up its sleeve, but it's not a one-trick pony. It sounds good top to bottom. When you hit the bottom, things get different, and I think most people will appreciate what it brings to the table. Just mind the fitment. It is, again, a larger, chunkier IM, quite light actually, and don't mind the sound it makes. When you hit it, you can feel the vibration in there. When it's in your ears and it's playing music, it does sound quite good. Once again, thank you for being here for this review of the Kiwi Ears Etude from Silicon Sounds. Please like and subscribe. We're a growing channel. It's growing slower than I'd hoped, but you know what? Quality over quantity. I want to thank you very much for being here with me and look forward to the next video from Silicon Sounds. Audio for the rest of us.